All right. So yeah, I've got to get some podcast music here, to start. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-bum, bum,
Boom,
cha-bum.
boom, boom.
Pocket Coach with your host, Cody Morris, and his guest, Rory McKenzie.
Yeah.
Well, we'll just use that. That'll be the
Sounds
intro right
good. Yeah,
there. Okay. I'll
until we
just
get
clip
something
that,
better.
and that's going to be the intro.
There we
So
go.
if you didn't pick it up, that's today's episode is episode 2. We've done 2
Ooh,
podcasts. All right. It's almost we almost established a pattern. We need one more.
100%
And if
more.
I do it for 30 days, and it's a habit, right? So, episode number 2, we're going to be talking recruiting in
Yes.
a general sense with Mr. Rory McKenzie. And if you don't know Rory, then I'm going to assume you're probably pretty new to the community. Welcome. This man helped me whenever I was a new coach. I bothered him in tab rooms every weekend until I learned a portion of all of his expertise. And then, then we ended up in the same district together and we had to compete. And so he ended
Yep.
up creating his own competition. Um,
Yeah.
but we were both better for it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole goal, right?
Yeah,
We stronger, better together.
absolutely. There you go.
Yeah.
That could be a campaign slogan.
Yeah, there we go. It sounds like it was one back
We
in the day.
need we need a public education, rep in our district over here, Rory. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
You got my
that's true.
vote.
I could do
So
it. Yeah.
in that, let's talk recruiting. Let's get it
Yeah.
going. And so one of the biggest struggles, and this was in the Facebook group that we created to kind of help provide resource and conversation and discussion for UIL academic coaches on Facebook. If you're not there, UIL academic coaches Facebook group, search it out. We just started it. It's going great. We've got 430 members and it's growing every day. So come join us in the discussion in the community. It's all free resources, no advertisements, just content. And one of the things that I asked was, what are the biggest struggles that you face as a UIL coach and or coordinator? And overwhelmingly, the top result was recruiting. It
Yep.
feels
You got
like,
to get them in the door.
yeah, I mean, obviously that's the first step is to get students on the teams before you can teach them anything. And
Yep.
so yeah, so we're going to talk recruiting today, and I'm going to kind of give a general overview of recruiting and what that kind of looks like in a real world sense. And then Rory's going to talk UIL, and he's going to be the UIL expert for the episode on, what type of functionality and how can it be applicable in the world of UIL coordinator. So the first reason and or way that the textbook would describe why someone joins a team. Because in reality, recruiting is just a sales pitch. You're really
Yep.
selling that individual on buying your program with their time, right?
Yep.
Like that's how I approach recruiting and or, um, getting someone to join on is why should they give me their time um, and purchase, participation in our events and or program or community with the time that they have available. And if you coach at a smaller school or even bigger school, you know that it's the top 20% of the class that does everything. And then so
Yep.
not only are we sharing kids, but we're also, working with a finite amount of time in the day that they have available to participate in things. So the first reason is that you share a purpose and or a shared goal. And so individuals are usually drawn to teams that are working towards a mission or an objective that they share and that they believe in and or find meaningful. And so contributing to something larger than themselves is usually one of the big draw factors for individuals in joining, whether that's a team, a school district, maybe even recruiting UIL coaches, selling
Mm.
them on joining something bigger than themselves, participating in a mission that is larger than something they could do on their own. And, of course, everyone wants to be successful. And so when they believe that they have a chance of achieving this greater purpose and or greater mission and or larger goal, they're much more likely to join in.
No, I agree. I mean, like what we're talking about here with UIL is we're talking about a goal that every school probably has, or at least your administrators probably have for you, even if they're not totally sold or totally bought in on the idea. they're so familiar with UIL. All their sports teams, music, everything is UIL in Texas. So like the shared goal is there, right? I think the encouragement that I would give a lot of new coaches and new coordinators or anything like that is like the shared purpose doesn't need to be necessarily win state or like it doesn't have to be at the top. The shared purpose may literally be just getting a common group of little UIL nerds or whatever, giving them a place to be, to giving them a place to exist. It's so natural for athletics and maybe even fine arts and things like that to get some of that recruiting done. A lot of it starts before they get to high school. They already kind of, know what they if they're playing if they're in band they started when they're in sixth grade. If they're playing sports they started playing long before freshman year of high school. But in so many ways, a lot of students' first real foray into the UIL academic events that we have is when they come as a freshman. Even if they participated at the junior high, very few of those events are the exact same. So you're starting with a brand new group potentially, new students to the district, new students from out of state, new students who don't know what this is about, and creating that environment to be just a place where we're gonna get together, we're gonna work a little bit, we're gonna have a little fun, we're gonna grow, and then we're gonna try to go out and achieve. And I think that that's just a really good place to start. And that seems real basic, but it's got to have that energy, especially for wanting kids to give up their times, whether it's after school, before school, or especially when we go to tournaments on the weekends. We gotta have it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you touched on it that like the idea of a shared purpose or a shared goal taps into that need for belonging
Hmm.
or meaning that we all want to work for ourselves. But when you were talking, I thought about kind of my own life and how whenever I got married and I had children, now all of a sudden my career and my work became much more meaningful because it wasn't just about me. I was
Yeah,
accountable to a group and accountable to people that I cared about. And, although that's, maybe an extreme example, but they talk about that in teams about building a family. Because not only does it make it easier to recruit, and you hear that a lot of times in positive or negative, gangs recruit. The idea of the family is every movie ever made is they're recruiting and the idea that you can have the family you don't have and will have your back and protect you. But
yeah.
in a positive light, that creating that family, creating that environment that is a shared purpose in terms of a group of people working together and holding each other accountable. What might sound like a negative, but a lot of times is what brings people in. So
Oh,
how
for
like
sure.
what are some examples of maybe some shared goals or purposes that you might have used or have on your UIL team?
Well, I think you get, as specific as you can. Goals need to be like they need to have clear objectives, they need to be achievable. We want them to have some sort of scale, some objectivity to it as well. There's a coach in our community from Shelbyville, shout out to Emily Sowell, who I think her team set a shared goal of getting like 100 trophies this year.
Yeah,
And
I saw that.
I've been watching their journey on social media, like every time she gets that's like the center point. Not that it's all about trophies, and I know she knows that, but it does give the team something to build towards. I was talking with my accounting sponsors, relatively new, and we knew we weren't going to come in with a group of freshmen and like master 400s and plus on the accounting test. So, we set measurable goals. Like we wanted everyone to ace the first section, the first like section one on the test. 100 was the first goal. And you just kept ticking it up basically. And there was so much excitement. I mean, like, and for those of you who know accounting, you know that 100 is not great. It sounds great when you get 100 on a test, but for accounting, that's not really what we want. We want it to be much higher. But the excitement that they had in that moment, that's what's going to keep them coming back. That's what's going to let them feel like they have achieved something and they're all working for it. They're all helping each other and, kind of seeing that progress. So those sort of like measurables help make those goals have a little bit more meaning and power, I think.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Is setting attainable goals, right? The idea of smart goals, but we'll save that for another episode. So, the second reason, that in the research that we uncovered, kind of looking for the top 5 reasons that people join. And when you think about recruiting, you want to, like I said, it's a sales pitch. You've got to convince them to purchase your activity with their time. And one way that obviously it's shared goals, bigger meaning, greater purpose, but also social connection and belonging. And you hit on that in the explanation on the first point about how kids, and I mean humans in general, but children, students, 14, 13 years old, when you think about who are you recruiting, of course, sometimes we end up recruiting juniors and, maybe someone
Sure.
for 1 or 2 years because they became available free agents.
Right.
They quit band or they quit athletics, and you've been trying to get them for 2 years, and you'll take 2 years over 0 years. But in general, we want to recruit kids coming out of eighth grade. We want to recruit kids in junior high, um, to be on our team. And so creating that need for connection and speaking to that family atmosphere is one of the biggest opportunities that we have. And that's honestly, I think this is one of the toughest ones to create because it really can't be artificially
Yeah.
like implemented. It can't
Yeah.
be an infrastructure of the program. The culture and the family and the connection has to be genuine. And
Yeah.
you shouted out Emily, and I was thinking, and I saw a Facebook post from Keisha over at Sabine, and if you've ever been around her team, they are all together and laughing. And that she's a 3A school, but she has a huge team, and they're always laughing and having fun. And she's always got more kids than she knows what to do with. And I think this is a great connection or example of how they just all have these friendships and experiences together, and there's such a community. And Keisha Barnes over at Sabine just has that personality and that culture built in that it just happens. It's not an intentional like daily thing that she has to think about. She's natural at it, and she's built it, and then the kids continue to it add to it and keep it going. And it's clear because I look at her 40 debate students and speech and debate kids, and I just am amazed at how she has such a big team. And I think it's clear that the social connection and belonging
Oh
is
yeah.
her leading recruitment tool.
Yeah, I mean, again, kids they need a home. I mean, they want a home. And there are plenty of places that can give them a home on campus. And I think part of our job is to make sure that we make it ours, right? Like we've got to make our place. And again, I think you can think of that in two different levels. You can think of it as like all UIL as a whole, but then even I would encourage your sponsors to have little things that set that belonging and connection on their team. So like, I don't know, you may have like mascots for the Lit Crit team and like, I don't know, preferred snacks that the math and science teams, get or something like that. Whatever it is, and it just creates it. Or like a photo trend or a specific type of photo, like maybe you're the type you're always going to get one at the end eating your medals or something, whatever it might be. Those tiny little things, there's stuff that kids look forward to, and it makes them feel like they've set legacy or part of a legacy. And that's what I think a lot of kids really want to do. There are a lot of students who at the high school level, they're forward thinking. They're thinking about what looks good on resumes. What do they need to do to bulk up their resumes? And absolutely, UIL academics can do that. But if they're already doing a bunch of stuff, they also want a place where they can feel fulfilled. And I think that, not that taking each of these little academic tests is a great way, but it's the connection that you get it from doing with your buddies, uh, you know, trips that you get to take, hopefully to Austin. That's great.
Yeah.
And just doing those types of things like that's how you build it. But even if you're not at that state, it's everywhere else. It's when you get together for a team practice and who's bringing the gummies, and it's when you're going to a local tournament an hour away, donuts for the team and stuff like that. Those tiny little things just feel like they're part of something bigger and they appreciate it. They want it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, not to get too emotional about it, but just that genuine sense of care and love that we can provide. And that doesn't mean, ooey gooey, give you
Yeah.
hugs love, but that thoughtful moment where oh, I knew you loved this snack. I bought this for you for the trip.
Yeah.
I know these are your favorite gummy bears or like you talked about. Um, you know,
I think overwhelmingly coaches can all probably fill in their own story about a random gesture, a random word, a random anything that, didn't feel very large in the moment that to a kid, really can at the
yeah.
end.
And I'll
Um,
say, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
no, I mean, that's it. That's what makes it feel good. That's what makes it feel special.
Yeah. And I'll say some of the closest teams that I've had weren't really the most successful. It
Yeah.
wasn't that they were super successful and so they were super close, but so you don't necessarily have to be, a great UIL coach and have state championships to be able to recruit and build a team, especially a team that you enjoy. And you talked about something and I wanted to hit on that building that culture, one thing that I've learned and I'm still learning and trying to implement is the idea that not only do you have to like build the positives, but as a coach, we're also responsible for removing the negatives. And
Yeah.
if you get that one sour apple or negative Nancy, for lack of a better term, in that group, and it can kill the culture,
Yeah.
then you can have a lot more trouble recruiting in the future. And I've seen that in my teams of where you delay removing people from the team because you want to let everyone participate, but then it ends up almost killing the program from the inside because you have a lot harder time recruiting because of the negativity and the overall culture of the team that that you allow. And what's that common phrase that culture isn't what you something is what you allow. I'll have to look it up later.
I go,
Um,
yeah. I
yeah,
don't know
no,
what you mean.
we're gonna live Google here, but yeah,
Someone in the podcast is listening and knows exactly what
yeah,
it
the
is.
phrase.
Too bad it's not alive that way, but
I'm doing it now. It's gonna bother me, but yeah,
well, I mean, it's just so important. I mean, kids need it. They're looking for it. And again, there's a lot of like, different cultural aspects to that. And you're putting people together who maybe don't have a lot in common initially, but then they build it. And that's the kind of stuff they're gonna, stick with and remember. My debate partner in high school, shout out Lauren, if you're listening, doubt you are,
shout out
but
Lauren.
like she was a varsity volleyball athlete who also did debate, and I was very much so a nerd. But it was nice. Like we were together for that. That's what we were together for, and
Yeah,
you
and
know,
oftentimes those make the best teams.
those are the best bonds. Yeah,
Almost kind of like a marriage. You want you know
yeah, a little
people that
complimentary.
have complementary strengths. And culture isn't just about what we encourage, but what we allow or
Yeah,
permit to happen on the team. And so that's what I
yeah.
was going for. Looks like there's about 30 different versions of that. But let's go ahead and move on so we can cover the other three without making this podcast too long, but we don't want to cut the content and the value. So the third reason why people join in these top 5 reasons why people join teams is that there are learning and growth opportunities. And, especially our high performing students, the ones that we really want on the team, they're looking for ways that they can grow and develop.
Yeah,
They've got big goals, they've got their personal ambitions, and those kids in my experience, are looking those coaches up and down, and sometimes they join the programs not really based on their interest, but based
yeah,
on which coach or which program has had success in the past, and which one do I think that I would be successful on. And so, offering those opportunities to grow, as much as you might not think that kids want to do summer camps, a lot of times being able to attend summer camps is a big recruitment tool. Either that's something you host or you bring people in, or if they're able to fundraise and send kids to summer camps. That's a big thing in the speech and debate world. Um,
Mhm.
but
Yeah,
that creates an environment that they feel like they can expand their abilities, that they can develop new skills, and that they become a better version of themselves. And
yeah,
as much as we don't think kids are students and 14-year-olds are thinking about that, the ones
they
that we
are.
want, yeah, the ones that are going to excel and push themselves and be self-starters,
Yeah.
they're joining your team because of the growth opportunities.
Well, and even to go a step further, the parents want that too. Like their parents at eighth grade recruitment nights and freshman fish camps, like the parents want to know that their kids are going to see improvement. They're going to change in positive ways, not just because they're, you know, learning new material, but they're learning material that they wouldn't get any other place. And so I love the way that UIL some semi recently sort of reorganized the UIL website and kind of categorized the events. And now we've got like the STEM events are separate, and we've got like the other like more literary events are kind of together. And there really is so many different there's so many different pots, and some of the tests are more like memory checks, and then like there's a set curriculum. You kind of got to memorize certain things. Like crit, you got to memorize those Pulitzer winners and Nobels and things like that. And then others, they're more kind of analysis based, which is kind of like current events a little bit to some extent. Some of the stuff, parts of the social studies test. And I there's it's just different skill sets for kids. But what I think is also great is how then those students can use that expertise to improve themselves in their other classrooms.
Yeah.
And they see that, like when they're able to go through a couple of years of UIL social studies, and then when they sit in an upper level history class, an AP class, or a dual credit class or something, and they're not just a part of the discussion, they're a leader in the discussion, that's the growth. And that's what we want. We want to see that. And UIL really does provide that. And speech and debate, of course, like I don't want students to come to me like I don't want students to come thinking they're experts or thinking that they already know all this stuff. Like that's my job, is to teach them and to change their perspective and to give them that opportunity to grow. And they get that so well. And UIL provides like just a natural framework for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the biggest reasons or phrases or recruitment tools, there's what I'm looking for, that I use for Extemp is I talk about how much it's going to make their life easier when they have to write essays for English and or college classes. And I can't tell you how many students have come back that I've coached in Extemp, and by their junior year they're taking 1301 dual credit, and they're just whipping out essays because they've learned that skill that was so easily transferable. And if you know anything about taking college classes, there's a lot of essays to write in college. And so every college, yeah, college inside the university, business, education, hospitality, STEM, you're going to be writing essays. So
Everything.
yeah, everything's going to require
And UL
long
has always
form
been good about
answers.
making sure that the events that we're doing, that they're aligned to, TEKS, or that they're aligned to what the high school experience is.
Yeah.
That's why we even see different events in junior high and A plus, because those events aren't, maybe developmentally appropriate or whatever. And they scale it towards that. So there's great opportunities for some growth there.
Yeah. All right. Well, just as people are motivated by the opportunities or self-improvement or potentially bettering their positions for career and or college acceptance, they're also uh, they're also motivated by the idea that the whole is greater than the sum in terms of winning and having collective achievement, being a
Yeah.
part of a bigger team, and,
Yeah.
and I think we see this. And, I use sports analogies a lot because that is what the general public understand. But I think it's why a football state championship is so much more has so much more allure and respect and or upholding than an individual track state championship, because the collective achievement of getting a group of people to work together is so much harder and it's so much bigger of an ask
Yeah.
that, when you think of speech team state championships or overall sweepstakes state championships, there's a lot less of them, and the weight of a collective achievement is just something that can change students' lives, and it creates that vision. And I'm going to steal something from some of my business podcasts, but they talk about when, running or owning a company, that you have to have a vision big enough to get your team to have their visions fit in it. That you have to create a vision big enough for your organization that the team that you're recruiting or the people that you want to hire, that their big visions will fit in it. If you start a company and someone has a vision to be the CEO, that they have that vision fit inside of the company's vision as they grow. Or, if they want to be the CFO or they want to be the head of marketing or whatever their vision is for their career, that your vision as a company has to be so big that the individual's vision fits in it. And I thought about this in terms of a collective achievement, that as a UIL program, we have to have a big enough vision and or goal, not so much selling that like, oh, we're going to try and win sweepstakes or, bust, but these individuals don't just want to see themselves succeed, but they want to be a piece of a bigger vision, even more so. And it kind of lends itself from the collective achievement, but also the belonging and the shared purpose and goals. But this is the idea that we work together and achieved, and that idea of kind of collaboration and the satisfaction between, but because of you're not just the greatest individual, but you were the greatest group.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, to take another activity that really I think exemplifies this super well in Texas is our bands out there, our marching bands who like work so much, and you don't see an individual marcher, you don't hear an individual instrument, but it's the collective, and that's what's one of the nicest things about UIL too is just that you can have a team where someone has an off day or something. They don't happen to test well, but they still have a shot. When I was,
Yep.
raise your hand if you're a speech and debate coach who just got thrown into current events because it seems to make sense. But when I started really coaching current events, um, right initially, we weren't worried about the essay. We were worried about the objective because that was the team score. And we were focused not necessarily on getting individual rewards or individual placements, but where can we go as a team?
Yeah.
Um, and we had some great success that way. Like it was motivational. Everyone kind of had individual marks that they knew they were going for. And that was a great way because we may not have placed, first, second, or third even, but we might have had a large enough team score. And I think that that's a nice thing about the, three up or six up at district, but only three count towards the team. There's a lot of wiggle room. And it is about that overall achievement. When you're talking about sharing this stuff with the shareholders in your district and your community, you know, while, me on the inside, I know how big a deal it is for a student to get first in the lit crit test, which is just such a hard test. Like, I know what that means. The community may not fully understand what it means, but they do understand what a sweepstakes means. They do understand what an overall championship means. They understand that you finished third, even if it's not a championship, but third out of 30 schools or anything like
Yeah.
that. Like those are measurable and knowable, and that's knowable for your kids too. Your kids know that, and they appreciate that. Their parents appreciate it. It's something easy they can go back to. So even if you've got a kid who only takes, I don't know, the spelling test, and that's the only thing they do, they are still part of not just the spelling team, but they're part of the UIL team as well. And so they get to be a part of all that. And if we give them that sense, they know that their stuff is necessary. I think so many times kids get competitive, which is great, but sometimes they get a little too they're what is that? Sorry to give another cliche, but they're looking at they can't see the forest through the trees, right?
Yeah.
And it's our job as the coordinators and coaches of the individual teams to support team and show that team and that collective achievement first, which is so crucial.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, one of the things that I started doing, and especially when I was early on, was to because I had to change the messaging is, you can use the numbers and the math to your advantage to show achievement and or portray the results in a very positive manner towards your shareholders. I
Hmm.
love like reverse engineering the math of if you got if you made it to state in Congress, right? Well, there's seven, with 225 3A schools, and each school can enter three
Five
entries.
now. Five
Yeah,
now.
five. Oh, yeah, this is true. Like back when I think I did this, so that you can enter five entries. You make it to state, you're in the top 60. That doesn't sell as well as if you reverse engineer it and you say, well, they made it, beat out the other
Yep.
540 entries, and so you can look at what was behind instead of what was in front, and a lot of times you can rephrase that messaging and not only portray your kids achievements in a greater sense, but also give that kid a reframe, that student a reframe on how well they did. It's
Yeah.
everyone's gonna this is kind of getting sidetracked, but everyone changes and reassesses their goals as they continue. All right, I want to make state. Okay, I want to break at state. Okay, I want to win quarters. I want to place at state, and then they don't place at state and they're down, which they're
Yep.
if they're competitive is understandable, but reframing that messaging a lot of times can show that achievement. And then I think like what you referenced earlier, that collective achievement where the Emily over at Shelbyville was doing 100 medals as a collective achievement, and that was something they had a little bit more input on, a little bit more
Mm.
control they could
Yeah.
influence with their activity. And it's not so much, obviously you have to win that, but if enough people on the team go and attend enough tournaments, you really increase
Yep.
your odds of hitting that goal. And so
Exactly.
I really like that idea, and I might steal that. Sorry, fair warning, I might
And
steal
I think
that
we're
idea.
all, hey, that's what we do. Teachers are
Yeah,
thieves, right?
yeah. So if you see that on Facebook, just know that it was consensual. No. So, anyways, the last one, number five, is responsibility. And this is one that a lot of people don't think about. And I say a lot of people, like myself, that I would not assume, or initially, especially in my early career, assume that responsibility or tasks or accountability would be something
Mhm.
that would recruit people
Mhm.
in. But, then I start thinking about myself in the workplace and how, when you're given responsibility, it's a sign of respect. I mean,
Yep.
maybe not like sometimes you get in schools, you're giving you get extra responsibility just because it has to go to somebody. But in general, important tasks, important roles, head of departments, captains of the team, those type of responsibility, whether it's a title or actual role or something they have to do, gives them a sense of meaning. And being a part of the team isn't just a consumption for them, but they also are giving and being someone that can help and offer support to team members. A lot of times that can look like putting responsibility on your older students to help teach and give
Yep.
them some, almost kind of alumni responsibilities that you're part of this program, not just today, but tomorrow as well. And so, there's this need for security in a sense. And, and if you know anything about high school students, they're not the most secure with themselves. And no, they
Yeah.
should be. They're still figuring everything out. And,
Yeah.
I'm still figuring everything out. So, giving them some responsibility and a role, it kind of gives them some security in the sense of they can feel comfortable that they're doing what they're supposed to do, that they're, checking the boxes on the list so that they're not anxious about what
Yeah.
do I need to be doing, or, do they want me here?
Yeah, I think we sort of like getting this idea that we need to make it as easy on the kids as possible. Like we need to make participation easy. And certainly we want to reduce as much friction as we can as sponsors and coordinators. Like we want to try to give them the access that they need. But even knowing that, oh, okay, you're gonna, I want you to come back next week and have read, this chapter in the book or something, or I want to put, student, you're going to be in charge of making sure we have all the dictionaries together for the term. I mean, like these simple tasks, these simple things that, maybe you could do, but honestly, it's going to offload your work as a sponsor when you've got all these other things you're thinking of, but it makes
Right.
them feel like they've been chosen for something, and that if they know that if they don't show up, or if they don't follow through, that they're also letting down, maybe other people. And then it does give them the way to the gumption, I guess, sometimes to do extra, do more, right? And they get excited about it. If you give them a list of spelling words to come back the next time and have memorized, and then they're like, "Oh, I did five extra," or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
and they may, don't get me wrong, like with talking to their friends, talking to other teachers, I'm like, "Oh, I've got to do all this stuff for UIL spelling." But I mean, we know that when kids are even saying that type of stuff, they're still feeling like it is their responsibility, and they're still feeling that same sense of pride when they accomplish it and when they do it, and holding them accountable is so much part of it. What is that, like, you got that thing in coaching where, like, if your kids aren't doing something, or if they're falling short, it's not our job to, like, it's okay, it's okay, yeah, no problem. Like, we want to hold them accountable. We don't need to be, jerks or anything like that. We don't need to
Yeah.
scream when they don't, medal or anything like that, heaven forbid. But I mean, we want to push them. If we see behavior, if we see things that we can fix, like, that's our job. And if we can fix that quickly, the kids love that. And sometimes it does take just giving them work, giving them something to do, instead of just being like, "Oh yeah, you should be a part of my program. We're not going to do a whole lot. We're going to, do use some time where we have it, but it's real easy, real simple. You're going to love it."
Yeah.
That might get you a type of kid, but it probably is not the type of kid that's going to have longevity. You want the kid who's excited by the work, who feels like they came home with tasks. They've got things that they know what to do, or they know they can do. Um, and that's a really unique part of this recruiting stuff, because it makes them feel more connected to it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. And, like you said, you think that you're going to make an easier recruiting pitch of like, oh, you don't have to do much. It's not really a ask, but that'll get you in the short term. But
Yeah.
they're
Well,
going to
hang
get
on
bored
there. Yeah,
and they're
they're
going
gonna
to
get
see
bored.
it as a waste of their time.
Yeah.
And, either A, you're going to get the kids that are trying to waste time and they're going to
Yeah.
stay and then they're wasting your time, or you're going to get kids that are trying to do things with their time and they're going to see it as a waste of time and they're going to leave.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And and you said something about, if things can be fixed. And, one thing that I've really began trying to implement and do as we go, or like as I've, advanced in my career, is realizing that sometimes the idea of fixing or helping students is not necessarily doing more or like being more hands-on, but instead being more hands-off. I use the analogy of,
Yeah.
like with a toddler or a young kid. I know, not to equate these children, these students to toddlers, but as your young UILers, you get them up and walking and going, at some point, you want them to be able to walk beside you without holding your hand and without you having
Hmm.
to drag them through the year. And so at some point, you have to let go of their hand and expect them to, walk on their own and follow you, and not so much you push them,
Yep.
from behind or drag them. So,
Yep.
but yeah, so real quick, it's not to, keep going on too long, but let's give the audience, give our listeners, your most successful recruiting tip. What in your career have you had the most success recruiting with?
Yeah, I was gonna try to come up with a specific number, but I don't want to commit to like a top five or a top 10. But I do, I wanted you to be able to leave the podcast with a couple of key strategies. The first thing is individual outreach. Mass outreach is great when you just send, blanket emails or blanket announcements over the intercom, things like that. But never underestimate the power of an individual note, uh, delivered specifically to a kid, in third period class, from a teacher's aide or the office or something. And, usually those are the bad reminders, like you forgot to serve a D hall or something like that. But when they get that and they feel like just a sense of empowerment. It's great. I was in class the other day, my regular speech class, not competitive, basic speech requirement class, and I had a student, English language learner, and basic speech all about themselves, nothing too fancy, but I saw something in her, I saw some potential, wrote on her critique sheet, like I think, competitive speech may be something you could do if you're interested. Come see me. She could literally not wait to come and talk to me about it.
Yeah.
And those types of things are so crucial. So individual, you don't have to know the kids. You can send general emails to the entire staff and say this is what we're looking for, and I'm looking for the unknown kid. Yeah, I can get a list of the top 10. I can pull the honors English class rolls, and I can get that. I want to know about the kid who maybe isn't super talkative in your class, so doesn't stand out necessarily in that way, but you can tell that their attention to detail on, assignments is so critical. Where can we find a place for a student who has such a strong attention to detail, And while doing some mass recruiting, like again, honors English classes, things like that can be a great start, especially if you need to build en masse. Don't underestimate the kids who are new to the district, who aren't going to be on anybody's radar, but are probably dying to have someone show some interest in them.
Yeah.
And that can be a really great place to be. So that's the
Yeah.
first one. The second thing that I would encourage you to do is I would encourage you to make sure that each individual sponsor, like if you're the coordinator, I would make sure that each individual sponsor has the empowerment to like create their own little mini teams. Like I don't think there is a need as a coordinator for me to micromanage a lot of that stuff. Okay. I think I've got to handle, travel, requisitions, POs for different things, that kind of stuff. I do not think it's my job to micromanage it. So we want to facilitate the relationships between those coaches and those individual students, but I empower them to, go out and do it, to schedule a spelling recruitment event during lunches or to, something specific for each individual team. There's nothing wrong with that either. Okay. The th next thing that you want to do, I think, is you want to be very, very clear about your messaging about what the students can individually benefit. A lot of time these kids, at least initially, got to get them in the door in the first meeting, that kind of stuff. So they're, sometimes we're the vending machine society. They're instant gratification. Selling your stuff like, access to scholarship, access to letter jackets, access to trips. Maybe you do an overnight trip or something like that. Like kids are looking at that as opportunity. That's not going to keep them there, but it's going to get them in the door. And sometimes that's really great. You can also schedule like a recruiting event. I can't, I wish I could give the right credit to who gave me this idea, but I think a lot of schools do this, have like a rush event at the beginning of the year. Uh,
Fraternity.
yeah, exactly. Brotherhood, sisterhood, but have kind of a rush event at the beginning. Again, individual invites to those people, to the certain kids, make it feel a little exclusive. It can still be a big group, but a little exclusive. Bring them in. So that's great. And then I guess like if I can give you one last like really tangible thing, it'd be to take advantage of your student streams from lesser known sources. Cody kind of mentioned one of those, but like students who are leaving other programs, students who are leaving band, who are leaving athletics, who are no longer participating in something else. Now, sometimes we know that they're leaving for other reasons, but there are sometimes where that just got to be too much, or that
Yeah.
it wasn't part of their passion, or it wasn't what fulfilled them, and they may be looking for something to fill the void. So get strategic with that, and that's really great. I think I said last already, but the last thing that I would say is that
This real
there may
last one.
be, this really is my last one. But UIL academic participation on your campus in terms of faculty may end up being a very small group of people. I think at my school, I think I have like 13 or 14 faculty members in my UIL email group. But my faculty at the high school can all be a part of the recruitment process. and we rely on that. My mentor, Miss Caldwell, I remember the very last meeting that she led as coordinator at Lindale before I took over. She had given she had printed and given every single faculty member at our faculty meeting just a simple, small card and a bright colored paperclip. And she said, like, I want you every time you look at that, because the paperclip is about combining and like keeping things together. The paperclip is about pulling things together that need help staying together. And she said, every time you look at that, I want you to think about a kid who needs to be a part of something. And, and again, not all the time is this going to work, but we don't need a 90% success rate. If I have a
Yep.
10% success rate, I'm getting valuable kids who want to be a part. And I do think sometimes they need a central person like the coordinator to come to that I can then facilitate meeting the individual sponsors and things like that. But I do think that I would encourage us to make this a group project, make this a collective school project. That's part of the culture, and I think we can build that.
No, that's great. Leverage the resources around you.
Yeah.
I got two things that I wanted to add, and that, first one is in that students join in a similar, there's a concept, in the business world of like perceived likelihood of the outcome, right?
Mm.
And so why is this student joining? And so one thing that I'm implementing and working on in my team is creating a scholarship function through, we host tournaments and fundraise, and the kids will fundraise for themselves, especially when they think that it's going to feed their own scholarship fund.
Oh yeah.
But establish that says any student that does my program or does UIL for 4 years is going to get a scholarship. And it's, set aside an amount, 4,000, 5,000 a year, 1,000 a year, whatever it is. And, if there's two kids, if there's 10 kids, then you can chop it up in that way. And, it allows you to give them a 100% chance that they'll get the outcome that they want. Because from my experience, a lot of students are joining for the advantage that it gives them for college, and two, the benefit of scholarships to whether it's TILF or giving them more participation in extracurriculars and community service aspects, which also you can work into your program as well. And so I think that is a massive opportunity
Yeah.
um, to just give them the guaranteed likelihood that they receive the outcome, and then it makes them want to stay, because if they do
Yeah.
2 years and they're halfway there to their scholarship, then they're more likely to stay and finish it out. And maybe that you don't lose those seniors that are starting to look past you again because they've done 3 years. And then it gives you also an opportunity to really influence the team with the, accountability and standards that you put to what is expected for you to be on the UL team, how many tournaments you travel to, practices you attend, whatever that is, also can go into part of that reward system. And there you follow the process, you show up, you do your best regardless of whether you're the best or the worst. If you're here and you're part of the team, then you're going to get a scholarship. And I really like that idea, and I think that I think it's a great recruiting tool because it guarantees them something for their time.
Hmm.
Nobody wants to waste their time. And the last thing I can do is not really a tip, but more of a reframing. Is one thing I think is a big problem, and why we kind of perceive recruitment as a unit, as a group of UL coaches, as a problem, is because we want to fill every team. Everyone looks at
Yeah.
all these slots that exist, in 23 academic contests, one act and the film and the essays, and there's all these opportunities, which are great. But at some point, we begin to feel like we're not doing a good job recruiting because we're not filling all of our spots. And the reality is that you need to set a goal for your team.
Yeah.
And I learned this in speech debate. If I want to win speech and debate state speech team, it doesn't take 20 kids. In fact, it's probably harder to do it with 20 kids. If you have a good solid group of 4 or 5 students, that work hard, you can win state,
Yep.
and even on the academic side, a good group of a dozen students across all events, if they all peak and perform at their events, can win a UIL
Well,
sweepstakes. And I think you've had some examples of that where you had a couple kids in speech and debate that won a couple different
yeah.
events or placed in journalism, placed in multiple events, and next thing you know, you're winning UIL
Well,
academics with a handful
well,
of students.
and it's a good reminder to for us to share as
Yeah.
well. Like you may have a great speller, and that's great, but they also may be really good at writing, or they also may be really good at, I don't know, what's in block three, social studies or something like that. And we should encourage that.
Yeah.
Some kids just have it, and where you've got it, take the benefit, but you don't want your sponsors to get super territorial. You study that conflict pattern, you know where students can go, and plug and play.
All right. Well, this was probably a little longer than we intended, but I think it was packed full of value. I hope you enjoyed it. I really appreciate you coming on, Rory. And I
Yeah.
know I'm going to have you on, as much as I possibly can get you on without bothering you too much. But you're a huge asset, and we appreciate you sharing your information and knowledge. And so I hope you got something out of this. There's some takeaways right at the end that hopefully you can take back and implement. And that is the end of episode 2 for the Pocket Coach podcast. I'm Cody Morris. That's Rory McKenzie. And, make sure you check us out at pocketcoachacademy.com for all of your UIL needs. Y'all have a good night.